Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cast and Spear Podcast. My name is John, and today we have the founder of Immersion Freediving, Ted Harty. He also has an amazing course that I took when I got started in freediving and spearfishing called freedivingsafety.com. He now has a new podcast called Freedive Live Podcast. Welcome to the show, Ted.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, John. I look forward to being here.
Oh, perfect. This whole week, we're going to be covering a whole bunch of different things across the gambit of freediving and some spearfishing. But today, we are going to talk about how not to kill yourself freediving. This is a good topic. We all need to pay attention to safety. So, Ted, let's go into some of this freediving safety. What are some of the key points we should take away?
Well, so there's a couple things. So first off, in general, everyone who's listening to this has probably heard this. You're not supposed to dive alone. Well, everyone knows that. You've heard you need to dive with a buddy. But so a lot of people say, Ted, yeah, absolutely, I dive with a buddy. But really, what does that mean? I know the typical, spear fishermen, right? So they go out to the super secret spot, they throw the anchor overboard before the anchor hits the bottom, right? It's first in, first fish. This one goes this way, this one goes the other way, and they all scatter. But they're in the same area, and so they're saying that they're watching each other. But the reality is that really is not much different than three people just being in three separate boats. So when you say you want to dive in a team, you want a buddy, one of the critical things is that when you hit the surface, you need that buddy to be what I call close enough to grab. That way, if the person surfaces and they do have a problem, they have a blackout, they have a loss of motor control, if they're next to you, they can very easily fix that situation. The reality is many times people are spearfishing, they come up to the surface, there's no one there, right? There might be someone in the area, 100 foot away, 200 foot away, that person might be underwater chasing after a fish, but none of those scenarios do you any good. You need to be right next to the person when they surface. What a lot of people don't know is that 90%, most of the blackouts happen right there at the surface. They hit the surface, they take a couple of breaths, and then they go out. So as long as there's someone there next to you when you hit the surface, that's really the biggest hurdle that people need to overcome.
No, that's huge. And then I guess my question though is, how do you get the buy-in of the whole buddy system? Because I know there's a lot of materials out there, especially from you, on like, hey, this is why we dive alone. But I feel like the biggest hurdle that we're all kind of facing is, how do you get your buddy to be like really believe in safety and that he'll watch your back? Is there anything that you've seen over your decades?
Yes. So a couple of things. So first off, I have an excellent video. When I started teaching freediving, showing this video really made it get the point across to spear fishermen. So I've got a great video shot by Ren and Ashley of Evolve Freediving. The spear fisherman, he dove for 25 years. So he's been spearfishing for 25 years. He went out with Ren and Ashley on a spearfishing trip, and he said he typically dives by himself. He was comfortable hunting in 70, 80 feet. But so when he was out with Ren and Ashley, they're like, okay, well, I understand you dive by yourself, but if you're diving with us, like we got to dive in teams and this, that, and the other. And he made 7 drops on a 50-foot spot, right? So he did, the same spot, 7 dives. And on his last dive, he shoots the fish, secures the fish, heads up to the surface, and about 25 feet from the surface, if you watch the video, I mean, I see it as a freediving instructor, I can see his kick is getting worse and worse, and he's just getting really, really ineffective. And then at about 10 feet, you see him black out. So the first thing you know that happened is you see the release of air, so the bubbles come out, right? And then because he's overweighted, as many spearfishermen are, he starts sinking down to the bottom. At that point, the video is cut because Ren was videoing that. He then had to put the camera away and take care and rescue the guy. And so it's more than just that's a blackout video, because there's tons of those on YouTube and they don't particularly change people's mind. But when you dive into what happened, this guy had been diving for 25 years and never had a problem, right? So if you calculate, we got to guess, how many dives does an active spearfisherman do after 25 years? Obviously I can't put a number on it, but to me, 50,000 individual drops seems reasonable, right? I do 60, just teaching a day of class. So if he's had, let's just put the number 50,000, he's had 50,000 dives, and 1 out of the 50,000 dives went wrong. Luckily for him, the 1 out of the 50,000 dives went wrong happened to be the only time he had someone that was there watching. So those two things intersecting is the only reason he's alive. If that that blackout had happened on any of the 499,999 other dives that guy has done, he would be dead. So people say things like, but Ted, I don't push myself. I know my limits. I've never had a problem. That's true. That's true for almost every spearfisherman, right? Is that they haven't had a problem, right? The problem is that argument is always true until you're dead. That's the way that argument works. And so but it's hard. It's hard to convince people when they're diving unsafely. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not being safe. And they're like, yeah, but I've never had a problem. I'm like, yeah, but you're not being safe. So it's like, they're like, Dad, you're not listening to me. But what you need to understand is not having a problem does not define you as safe. It just means you haven't had a problem. What defines you as safe is what happens to you if you've had a problem, right? When you look at it in other sports, it starts to, I think, really make it a bit more sense, right? You don't see skydivers say, well, look, I've been skydiving for 20 years and I've never had a problem. I'm so tired of packing the reserve chute. It's such a pain. You got to put it in there. It takes all the time to pack it. I'm just going to quit packing that reserve chute. No, they don't say that because they don't want to go splat, right? People don't say things like, well, I don't want a car with an airbag, or I don't want to wear a seatbelt because I've never been in a wreck. It's like, no, if I get in a wreck, I want to be in a better off situation. So they put the system in.
No, that's huge. I think they call that a black swan event, right? Like in economics, where you can do everything right. I guess people just don't have a good sense of judging risk to begin with.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's like, and again, if blackouts were more common, you wouldn't be able to. But look, if you went on a trip with like 5 or 6 folks and went down to the Bahamas, and like you spent 5 days spearfishing, diving, and at the last day, you don't sit around and go, man, that was crazy. We had 16 blackouts, right? John blacked out. So yeah, only got 6 times, and then Bob would blacked out 3 times. She blacked out 20. No one blacks out. So it allows everyone to stick their head in the sand and act like it won't happen. So I guess the other thing is that, the reasoning behind it is very complicated and beyond the scope of this podcast. But what most people don't understand, in that video I referenced earlier, you can talk to that guy. He'll tell you he felt fine. He felt fine right before he went out, right? So people think, but I know my limits and I don't push myself. I'm in tune with my body. That's what I always say, I'm in tune with my body. The reality is, if you could literally feel fine seconds before a blackout, we've got videos that show it. The physics proves that. But if once people, I think, can understand and believe that that's actually true, then that's really the only. They're never going to get bought in on safety until they understand and believe that fact, right? So when I first started teaching freediving, I would just tell people, look, you have to dive in a team. Like, don't be an idiot. And they never would listen. And I'm like, well, I don't understand why. I told them what to do. But it was because they just, until they believe, I think, that they could actually feel fine, you're never going to get buy-in. And, watching it on video, people watch that video and they go, ooh. So I think that's kind of one of the most helpful tools that I have, is to get people to understand that.
So let's leave people with one piece of advice that they can use today, which will probably save their life. And that's, how do you know if they're overweighted?
Okay, so that's a huge one. Most all spearfishermen that come into my class, all freedivers and spearfishermen that come into my programs are overweighted. So I can assume that means most of them out there that are in the wild are overweighted as well. So here's this super simple way. And this should be done, in my opinion, every time you jump off the boat. The first thing you do, and it takes 5 seconds, super simple, is you jump into the water wearing whatever you normally wear. You take a big breath in, and then you do a relaxed exhalation like a sigh. And then you don't move your feet and don't move your hand, and you see what happens. That relaxed exhalation like a sigh, that's exactly how much air you would let out if you blacked out. So if you jump off the boat and you do that test, you're seeing, hey, what would happen to me if I black out? And most of my students, the first day in class, I let them, I let them wear whatever they want to wear. I say, do that relaxed exhalation. And almost all of them are blah, 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 down to the bottom, right? So the idea is, that's what I call failing the surface safety test. You just found out if you black out, you're going to end up on the bottom of the ocean. So in my opinion, that's a poor weighting strategy. So the idea is you take a pound off, do it again, take a pound off, do it again, take a pound off, do it again, so that you can make sure you're not sinking on that relaxed exhalation. But one thing to be clear, I did not say big breath in, relaxed exhalation. That's pushing every bit of air out in my lungs possible. That's not what I said. I said big breath in, relaxed exhalation, just like a sigh. And that will let you know if you're going to float or sink on a blackout.
Perfect. I think we can stop there. Guys, take safety seriously. I took Ted's freediving safety course, and it helped me save my buddy's life. So I'm always indebted to Ted's knowledge. So thanks for coming on the show, Ted. And if you want to reach out to Ted, go to @ImmersionFD on all the socials, and in the show notes, I will have links to all of his different courses, his podcast, and everything else that he's doing. Thanks, Ted. Hey, just one more thing before you go. Would you find it helpful to get a few fishing tips and tricks sent straight to your inbox? Well, if so, head over to castandspear.com/join and sign up for our weekly newsletter. Tight lines.